So this is mostly in metastatic, although I mentioned limited stage incorporating immunotherapy has been done. Those trials have been done, and we should have data sometime in the near future, I would expect. So we're now going to talk in extensive stage, so stage 4. So chemotherapy plus immunotherapy is the standard of care. And like I said, immunotherapy is, for a subset of individuals, is leading to years of disease control. And I still have, I have a patient that I treated on one of these trials. So she's now more than 5 years from when she was initially diagnosed, has not been on anything now for years at this point, and some of these really extraordinary outcomes we're seeing. But it's not everybody, and unfortunately it's just a subset of individuals. So the research is really more so after that point. After that point, the newest drug was from a few years ago. There's a drug called urbanectadin. This is another chemotherapy. This is a once every 3-week drug, so I think the schedule is good. It's not a home run. It's a step. It's another drug. It's another step in the incorporation of others. More novel therapies right now are really multiple that target DLL3. So as I mentioned, DLL3 is a receptor on the surface of many small cell lung cancers. There was an initial drug which unfortunately was not quite effective enough and caused too much in the way of side effects in the past. But that one targeted DLL3. It delivered chemo essentially to drugs with that DLL3 receptor. And it really showed that this is in fact something that exists on these cells. There is probably the furthest along is a drug called tarlottema, but this is a drug that binds DLL3 and binds immune cells, pulling them together, creating an immune response. And this, like the other immunotherapy, we're seeing a subset of individuals that really have extraordinary outcomes, long-term disease control with this drug. There are others in that class as well now. And so there are multiple of these drugs that bind the cancer cells and bind immune cells, pulling them together. There are other drugs now being developed that have a different target for the immune cells, so it brings in a different kind of cell from the immune system, along with the cancer cell to again create an immune response. There are drugs called antibody-drug conjugates. So this is a drug that binds a receptor on the surface of the cancer cells, and it pulls that drug in where it releases the chemotherapy inside the cell. So it's kind of like a targeted chemotherapy that then is treating these. And there are multiple different receptors now for small cell lung cancer that are being utilized in this way. So different ways of essentially accessing or utilizing like doors to small cell lung cancer to be able to deliver the chemotherapy into the cells. There are other drugs that hit different pathways. And on top of this, I'm kind of not naming all of them because I don't know if all the names matter as much as just the classes. So the other thing that overlays small cell lung cancer now is this framework of, can we subtype small cell lung cancer? So non-small cell lung cancer, we talk about adenocarcinoma, we talk about squamous cell carcinoma, and there are other less common ones. Within small cell lung cancer, it's just been all small cell lung cancer. But what we see is that there are probably 4 broad subtypes of small cell lung cancer. Now those have been defined, and how best to test those in a way that's really scalable, I think still needs to be sorted out a bit. What those mean, there's a lot of ideas about how those might affect treatment outcomes if we were to take a drug in development and say, wow, well, it tends to work better for this subtype than others. And we really focus the treatment on that subtype. And so this is something that's really being looked at within studies as well, as far as better defining what the clinical meaning of those subtypes is, how that would affect the treatment outcomes, and then the development of some of these drugs relevant to those subtypes is really an ongoing area of study.
When is the right time for the person diagnosed with small cell lung cancer to start thinking about or having conversations with their healthcare providers about clinical trials?
Right at the beginning. So small cell lung cancer tends to grow rapidly. So it's not necessarily something where you want to wait, but that doesn't mean you can't. When someone's having symptoms, particularly the more severe the symptoms, the more rapidly you really need to start treatment. So there's a balance here. If it's going to take a month to see somebody, you need to get started. If you're interested in a trial, when you contact one of the academic centers to say, I have small cell lung cancer, I want to be seen, it's good to highlight, I haven't yet gotten treatment and I'm interested in trials. It's possible that will kind of then fast track you for the oncologist that is running these trials, that's writing these trials, to then say, oh, we've got these research slots. I mean, I don't know. Because small cell lung cancer is something that cannot wait for treatment, whether somebody has initially not started initial treatment or later line treatments, if they call into Dana-Farber to say they want to be seen for small cell lung cancer, the schedulers contact me immediately to say this person is not on therapy. If somebody's on therapy, sometimes someone has just started treatment and they want to get a second opinion. Well, the first line treatment is pretty standard. And so almost always I'll say, this is what I would give you here, and I encourage them, this is great treatment. You can get this with your oncologist, and I encourage them to continue to get treatment with their oncologist. And I say, at the time where it grows, I will get you back in very urgently, because to be able to discuss clinical trials, you can't yet have started a treatment. I make sure we fast track everybody in to have this discussion. But for someone who's been diagnosed, the treatment you're going to get at every center is likely very similar, if not the same thing. But it's still good to be seen just to make sure. If you can be seen before starting treatment, that means clinical trials may be an option. There are trials going on, even in the first line. But in the first line, if you're not on a trial, the treatment works really well. The first line treatment for small cell tends to work great. Where it becomes really important is in the second line. If you're on first line treatment and the cancer grows, you really want to be seen in one of the centers that has clinical trials available. Now, while on first line treatment, while on the first treatment, you can say, hey, I want to see someone just so I'm set up, just so that I know them. And you can't necessarily have a discussion about what specific trials, because hopefully you're not going to need it for a long time, in which case the trials you discuss down the road would be different. But you do want to make sure you have a plan for when it grows, that there's someone you're going to get in with urgently to know your options. And sometimes that is to then go on one of the standard of care where you can continue to be seen by your local oncologist. And I certainly see patients where we'll talk about trials and we'll talk about also the treatment that they can get with their local oncologist. And sometimes that treatment with their local oncologist is the right thing for them. But if you've started a line of therapy, then you don't yet have it, then clinical trials are kind of not an option in that scenario.